The following recording will continue for P6 of DSR. In previous videos, I covered the first set of mechanics going into raw flame, and finally, we're at a point in P6 where effectively we've done the major mechanics. The only thing left is to do positioning in order to resolve Wyrmsbreath II, going into Cauterize, going into touchdown, and finally going into the transition for P7. As I've said multiple times in previous videos, now more than ever is it also very important to understand what your mitigations need to look like in order to successfully go into P7, because much like learning P2 ultimate end for the first time and then later learning the transition for P3 and what tools are required there, you cannot afford to throw away 13-14 minutes of the encounter due to not understanding what mitigations you need to put out to keep the party alive, whether you're a healer, tank, or DPS, and especially the DPS, because alternate end on transition into P7, it's extraordinarily hard, and it's very easy to just kill people to damage on transition. But going into P6, I'm gonna speed this along, and then I'll just briefly talk over what we're going to see. We're currently looking at my POV as a pure healer for P6. We're in P5. We need to make sure we see the buster in order to make sure our burst window and our pots align in P6. I spoke about this in the earlier video for P6. We're going into our 2-minute. We're getting into positions for Wyrmsbreath I, tanks and non-tanks in position. The DPS are spreading. And now we're preparing for Akafal 1 with Group 1 to the north, Group 2 to the south. We're preparing for Hollowed Wing 1. It's going to be tanks far, party close, tanks far, party close. And then we're facilitating Vow Pass. Then we're going to start going into Raw Flames. Keep your eyes on Nidhogg, keep an eyes on the outskirts. It's going to be uptime, party to 4, mitigate. We're baiting these puddles. It's going to be Hot Wing in, chains at the wall, Hot Wing in, and then followed by a Vow Pass between the tanks. Then we're going into Akafa 2, same as Akafa 1. We blow up Crestfelger. Keep your eyes on Crestfelger. Party close, tanks far, Hot Wing in. Party close, tanks far, Hot Wing in. And then we facilitate another pass. And it's at this point right here. Once we facilitate the Vow Pass, we go into Wyrmsbreath II. For Wyrmsbreath II, it's not too difficult. There's very fixed positions to move into in order to do this successfully. As you're seeing here in the POV, there's very, very specific positioning that needs to happen for Wyrmsbreath II. As regen healer, what's typical is to give the regen healer the far north, but as part of the pre-raid setup, it's just common for people to take a spot that they want to position for in preparation for Wyrmsbreath II. There is an updated diagram that the NAUR Discord posted that's available in the NAUR resources, and we're just going to spend some time to look at it. So from the POV that we're seeing on my video right here, we're currently looking at we're currently north facing south. So I'm currently here at the far north and I'm looking out in this direction. Much like I've said in previous videos, the tanks have their little pocket that I highlighted in a previous video that they need to position in order to properly bait their respective buster. If, say, in a scenario where, let's say, Frestfelger's mouth is glowing here on Charlie's side, that means the tank 1 is going to need to make sure they end up in their little pocket so that when they take the buster from Frestfelger, the radius of the the plume going off does not clip healer 1 or range 2. That's the positioning that needs to happen in this example. And it's a similar logic with if Nidhogg's mouth is glowing, then that means tank 2 is going to take a buster. And everything is mirrored. That's the beauty of static Wyrmsbreath II. So as long as this tank is in position, they'll be fine. It is super duper important, super duper duper important that the tanks end up in their little pockets if one of them is taking the buster. And I can't stress this enough, because what we'll see in the VOD very shortly is a scenario where tank 2 failed to be in their pocket at the time of taking Wyrmsbreath 2. Tank 2 in the VOD that'll show very shortly is just north of their little pocket on their respective side. So what ends up happening is tank 2 picks up and a breath from one of the people that are positioning here. The breath cleaves the tank and they pick up an ice dot. That becomes very problematic later on, because these two people right here, let's just entertain that they both actually get Frostfelger's ice breath. They're positioned such that their overlapping's not gonna get them killed to each other's breath. But once again, if you're a tank and you're not in your pocket, you're gonna run into a very big problem picking up one of the ice breaths, because what's typical is once we resolve Great Worm's Breath, and maybe the wide shot will help with this. Let's see. Skipping on ahead, going into P6. Here we go. What's gonna have to happen is looking at this little triangle here, and then looking at this little triangle over here. So the tanks are gonna be positioned here if one of them's taking the buster. Both tanks, tank 1 will bias on the left side of the map, tank 2 will bias on the right side of the map. Their responsibility is to make sure they get in front of everyone else who's going to be clumping together on, south of the front side, because the dragons will disappear after Wyrmsbreath 2, and then they'll prepare a dive. And the reason why we're spending time with this is because, once again, if the tanks are not positioned correctly, they risk picking up a breath, and in doing so, picking up a breath, they will get a fire or an ice dot. And the danger of picking up the fire or ice dot, let's pretend, and we're gonna see this in the VOD, let's pretend Frostfelger is here. Let's pretend Nidhogg is here. If tank 2 down here on the southeast picks up the ice dot, then later on when tank 2's positioning here, if they're not actively communicating with their tank or paying attention to what's going on with them, because there's a lot of movement going on, when Frostfelger dives, it is a guaranteed kill on tank 2 unless the tank throws up their invulnerability to try to survive. Reason being is because in this example, I'm saying tank 2 picks up ice dot from breath, goes into position, and let's pretend Frostfelger's here. Frostfelger will apply an ice dot to anyone that does not have a fire dot already ready to cleanse. So this is the danger in all of this. In the VOD, what we're going to see is we're going to see tank 2 positioned incorrectly. They're not in their pocket. They do get hit. They pick up ice. I'll just spell it here. Tank 2 picks up ice. Tank 2 correctly moves into position to take the Cauterize that we're going to see in a little bit. And we got extremely lucky because Nidhogg was diving on the right side. So that's also something to bear in mind. Does not matter. Typically for PF, does not matter if Nidhogg or Frostfelger is on the left or the right for the tanks. The tanks just position such that tank 1's on the left, tank 2's on the right side of the cleave for the Cauterize. But looking at this scenario real quick in the VOD, let me see. So going to download this because I don't have it downloaded. So we'll get that going. Okay, cool. So the video is downloaded and we're going to play it. So let's see. Okay, it's not letting me, oddly enough. Okay, there we go. So right here, we just got through Hollowed Wing 2. Unfortunately, Tank 2 dies because they did not resolve Hot Wing correctly. They were too far out. Right now, we're trying to do some recovery to go into Wyrmsbreath II. This group likes to have the regen south side, as we saw in the diagram. So it's not a hard and fast rule that healer 1, healer 2 have to be here. This group just likes to have their regen healer south and their shield healer north. It doesn't really matter. But so from my POV, I'm going to the far south, and keep your eyes on Irene right here in the party list. Irene is going to pick up an ice dot, and this is a big problem. There we go. Ice dot on Irene. We now have a 50-50 chance of wiping due to, unfortunately, Irene not being positioned. And as you can see right here, looking at the far right, I know it's a little difficult. I'm going to take a screenshot of this just to drive this point home. The reason Irene picked up the ice dot is because looking at their positioning, the tank pocket's supposed to be here, and they're up here. And that was being up because they weren't in the pocket, that was enough to make them pick up an ice dot from one of the breaths that we were seeing baited by myself and one of the range here. So once again, ice dot on tank 2. Tank 2 and tank 1 are moving into position, as well as the rest of the party. The cauterizes are wild charges. Keep your eyes on Irene. So we got extremely lucky. Irene has ice dot. We have Nidhogg right side. We're going to be successful. Restfogger is on left side. Now the thing with cauterized is it's very scary for the tanks. It is absolutely important that you have your mitigation schedules set up properly in P6. As I expressed in the earlier video, because as you'll see, keep your eyes on Kohi. Kohi drops really low. Kohi drops to about 3,000 health. Yeah, 3,000 health from soaking their cauterized. Kohi put up home gang because they're a warrior. Warriors will typically have their inbone up for this, but not the other tanks. So if you don't mit this proper, and you're not a warrior planning on inboning Cauterize, there's a good shot you're just gonna drop dead damage. And that's part of tank responsibility in doing Wyrmsbreath II. Taking it from the top, so you know we're resolving Hollow Wing 2, we're moving into position for Wyrmsbreath II. In the event of the shared buster, the movement's still the same for the tank. If the tanks are taking shared buster, they're just making sure that they're ending up in, down middle. And they'll be safe from all the other breaths, granted, as long as all the other breaths are positioned correctly and where they need to be. And especially for the melees do have to make sure they understand where they're going, because for there's actually visual cues that the melees will use. They're gonna use these little white tiles on the north side and then on the south side to position themselves accordingly. There will be cases as a melee that your tether will not stretch all the way. Assuming your maximum health and you have a shield, and preferably if you're a melee that has the personal shield, you want to pop that for Wyrmsbreath too, so that you can take the tether without the tether being fully stretched, and you're gonna be safe. You're gonna be okay. It is important to for the healers to make sure we're all topped up in preparation for Wyrmsbreath II. And then for the south side melee, usually melee 2 does not matter. They're usually clumping right here at the top left of this little white tile on the south side near the white tile near the #1 marker that's typically stationed here. And that's really all there is to it, honestly. If you look at this diagram, it gives you all the positioning cues in order to do this properly, and there's no ambiguity as far as, how do you do this. As long as you read this diagram and you understand what to do, you'll be fine. And this diagram's available in the toolbox and resources for the video description. So going into Wyrmsbreath II, on the healer side of things, what you need to be mindful of is make sure everyone is topped off, especially the person with the vow. On pure healer, what I typically like to do is I like to either throw a Benison, or if I didn't burn my Aqua Veil in Hollowed Wing 2, I throw something onto the Reaper. The Reaper has Vow in this scenario, and they need a little extra love because their tether's not stretched. But thankfully the Reaper survives. The healers have to get a heal out ASAP and bring everyone up, because as you can see on the party list, because we took our respective breaths without getting the breath cleansed, we are going to need to resolve stillness and Pyretic. Uh, first, well, I'm sorry, you're gonna have to hold still for Pyretic, because this dot ticks you for like a good chunk of your health, about like 80% of your health or something like that. So going into Cauterized, the healers are just getting everyone topped up ASAP, and then for non-tanks, what you need to do is you need to identify which dragon is which. So remember, if you have an ice debuff, you have to make sure you get cleaved by Nidhogg, because Nidhogg applies fire. So your ice debuff will get cleansed. If you are Frostfelger, I'm sorry, if you have fire debuff, you need to get cleaved by Frostfelger in order to cleanse your ice. I'm sorry, your fire with Frostfelger's ice. So ice, Nidhogg, fire, Frostfelger, and you'll be okay. It is very important that you don't read this Pyretic. The moment you move into position, just stop entirely. You have to stop, because this Pyretic usually instantly ticks the moment the debuff falls off. There's no delay in calculation, like it ticks immediately after. And there's a good shot you're just gonna die. So just spam escape on your keyboard, hold, sheath your weapon, whatever it takes. You have to hold still. Pyretic is applied, Cauterize goes off, the tanks take the dive, party moves north side. We have to be far north side in order to not die to the proximity of touchdown, because both dragons will do touchdown. And then from here on, we kill the dragons. It is a damage check. If I remember the math correctly, as long as the dragons are 13% or below, you're gonna meet the check. And then on touchdown, the entire party is moving to kill the dragons. The Reaper has to stay hard north where we were positioned to facilitate the final Vow Pass, and the final Vow is gonna typically move on to Caster. Look at the toolbox to confirm this, but if the Caster didn't get the Vow, then at the start, then they're gonna pick up the Vow at the end. You just need to pay attention to the sequence of the Vow passes. And from here on, we survive touchdown, we're burning the dragons, making sure that we kill them. If you are desperate for damage, it is okay. It's acceptable to burn the LB, either on caster LB or melee LB, whatever the scenarios. Immediately once the dragons are dead, the healers need to make sure everyone is topped off at 100% health, because Thornton will land on on stage and do some RP. Before Thornton lands, Istinian applies a bleed, like the one we saw in P4. So the healers have to make sure they heal through the damage and top everyone off. Here we have Thornton. Thornton's doing some RP, and Thornton is going to apply a second bleed. When this second bleed falls off is when the party throws out their mitigation tools. You should not be throwing out any overshielding like Veil or Shake It Off before this bleed falls off, or apply any like crit low or heavy shielding from the stage, because it's going to get wasted away by this dot. So you do want to wait until this dot finishes before we start applying mitigation. So dot has fallen off. We're going to start applying party mitigation. We have Magic Barrier, Tactician, Heart of Light, Dark Mind up. We have Crit Low active. On the region healer side of things, as White Mage, I'm applying Beniston to myself. I applied Beniston to another job I know does not have a personal shield, and I'm gonna apply Aqua Veil, I believe, on the Machinist later. The tanks also need to apply Buddy Mitt. So you see that the Dark Knight, unfortunately, due to Duty Recorder messing up, you don't see the Dark Knight in the party list, but the Dark Knight applies TBN on the Red Mage and applies Oblation on the Reaper. So everyone is getting Buddy Mitt, everyone is getting mitigated heavily, because as you're about to see on transition into P7, this thing hits like a truck. Even with all these tools, the ninja drops very low. It is not outside the realm of people dying to transition. We also had soil once the dot fell off. Again, I cannot stress this enough. If you don't know what you're supposed to do for mitigation, you're going to get the party killed. It's as simple as that. And then we go into P7. Now, what I like to do in preparation for P7, it's not mandatory, but it's one of those nice to-dos for the party, especially if it's your first time going into P7, is I like to mark the tanks as do not attack, so that the tanks and the party know where the tanks are. It just makes things a lot easier to keep tabs on them, because there's going to be a lot of movement going into P7. The only other thing I have from here on out, going into P7 from Wyrmsbreath II, Cauterize, Touchdown, and then Enrage sequence is recovery tech. So for all intents and purposes, this is mostly notes for the tanks. When we get to figuring out how to do recovery for P6. So in this VOD, I am currently tank 1 on P6. I'm the Paladin. We're just about finished wrapping up Death of the Heaven. All this information concerns the tanks. It doesn't really concern the party. I'm gonna skip ahead. We're in Doff. Okay, and then we're going into the P6 transition. So as tank 1, my responsibility is to reprisal the Akafas. Tank 2's reprisaling Raw Flames and Cauterize. And I'm really gonna emphasize this. So the Q that I used as a tank, right now, Nyreen is gonna explode. She's gonna take a solo buster. Once again, because Nidhogg's mouth is glowing and Pressfelger's mouth is not. So both of us go into our little tank pocket. When Wyrmsbreath is just about done casting, when it clears the B and breath, I pop my 30% tool, even though I'm not going to take damage. It's just to set up my schedule, because when we go into Wyrmsbreath 2, you're going to see my Sentinel, my 30% come back off cooldown. And then right here is where I pop Reprisal as tank 1 going into Akafa. So we're waiting for the Vow to assign. The Vow is assigned. I throw out Reprisal right here. And then we take damage. It's at this point when I see the cast bar for Hollowed Wing is when I should be popping my 20% mitigation. But Nyreen and myself had a disagreement as far as positioning because I incorrectly positioned. So I was supposed to pop my 20% a long time ago in order to not die to that. I messed up my mitigations, but I got extremely lucky here. We're facilitating a Vow Pass. We're going into Raw Flames. When we prepare for the Raw Flames sequence, this is Nyreen's Reprisal. Tank 2's Reprisal. So Nyreen's throwing out Reprisal. We're moving into position. We're both throwing out our party mitigation tools. Dark Mind and Veil went out. We're resolving Raw Flames. Hot Tail out. I have my eyes on Nyreen because Nyreen and me are going to have to do a tank pass real quick. So Nyreen and me get on top of each other. The Vow successfully goes on to her. And from here, I'm going to Reprisal Akafat too. So Reprisal is out. Group 1 to the north, Group 2 to the south. And then we prepare for Hollowed Wing 2. It's at this point, both my 30% and my 20% are still on cooldown. So it's at this point that I'm gonna pop my short mids. I'm gonna pop Bulwark and Sheltron to safely take my plume as tank 1 for Hollowed Wing 2. So we're moving into position. It tanks far, party close. I'm moving at the wall. I'm gonna pop Sentinel. I'm sorry, Sheltron and Bulwark. There's gonna be a Vow Pass between Nyreen and the DPS. The Vow Pass is complete. And right here, we're preparing for Wyrmsbreath II. I quickly scan the map. So I see, okay, Pressfolger's mouth is glowing, Nidhogg's mouth is not glowing. Slorm, myself in this POV, I'm gonna take the Buster. So I'm just waiting for Sentinel to come back off cooldown. I'm in my little pocket. Nyreen is on the opposite side. She's on her pocket. So from the POV, I'm up here. And Nyreen has to move over here. You know, at the start of P6, when Nyreen blew up, she just went over here. She was over here, and then I was in my little pocket up here, so that when she blew up, you know, it wouldn't kill us. We can't do this. We can't do that for Wyrmsbreath 2. There's very specific positioning for the tanks because I'm going to blow up, and you know I'm gonna be here. If Nyreen is up here and she took the Buster and she blew up instead, she would guarantee kill people up here. And she can't be up here because if she's up here, she's gonna get hit by the breath that the party is currently baiting. So Nyreen absolutely has to move to the south side of tank 2 and go into her little pocket down here. And as I shared with the VOD from earlier of the tank that was outside of their pocket, she can't be anywhere outside this pocket because she starts risking getting hit by a breath and then picking up a dot along the way. So that's what's going on in this POV right now. I'm in my little pocket. I'm gonna take the Buster. My Sentinel's off cooldown. And I'm gonna snapshot the mitigation tool before Wyrmsbreath goes off. Cool. And then I was late to popping my Rampart, but thankfully it is coming back up. So Rampart is back up. I'm popping my 20% in preparation for Cauterize. I am tank 1, so I'm on the left side, and Pressfolger's diving down on the left side. And then I should pop Sheltron right here. Here we go. And then this is very subtle. So keep your eyes on Nyreen. Nyreen is currently booking it because she was far south side. What Nyreen is going to do, she's going to position her body right here with Pressfolger on the left side, Nidhogg on the right. As tank 2, what you need to do is you kind of need to position center and throw out Reprisal to catch both dragons. That way, you improve the odds of survival for the tanks going into Cauterize. So you're going to see her scooch in there for a little bit. Here she is. And then she gets out the Reprisal. Reprisal is out. So she's positioned in between the two dragons, and she very quickly moves to her respective position. Cauterize is coming up. I pop Sheltron. I have my 30 and my 20% up. And then we had a little snafu right here. So Worms was full health. But due to having the Vow, I'm sorry, no, actually that's a green. I'm sorry. So Worms was full health. But there's a big problem. So the range of cleave for these dragons is their hitbox. So as you can see here, I'm targeting Restfelger. That's approximately how big his hitbox, and Nidhogg's hitbox is about yay big. So because what you should use as a visual cue is you need to make sure you clear these rails, like how I like to call them. You need to make sure you're entirely on this side. If you're anywhere beyond these rails, you know, on this side, very, very good chance, if not almost guaranteed, you're gonna take both dives and you're gonna die. So unfortunately, Worms here is taking both of them, and that's why Worms died instantly. Everyone needs to be well away on that side, on their respective side. So Worms died. We all resolved Cauterize. Restfelger is enraged, so big problem. On touchdown, Restfelger is going to do massive damage, and with no tools out, guaranteed going to kill people. So in recovery for the tanks, if you find yourself in a position where one of the dragons enraged, usually Restfelger, because if Restfelger kills somebody, he just enrages. What you need to do as a tank is you need to start mentally preparing to use the tank LB. So what I do is I do tank LB2 to try to salvage the run. And unfortunately for iGreen died. They died to damage because it was just a massive amount of damage. So this is a recovery tool for the tanks to do in case of emergency. And then this is also why in an earlier video I was stressing that after resolving Aquapod 2, it's in the party's best interest to just blow up Restfelger in the event that we mess up Cauterize as we did here, so that the instant Restfelger lands from touchdown, he will be enraged, but he'll just instantly die. And we'll still be able to continue on with the fight. We'll still be able to kill Nidhogg, assuming we do the Vow Pass correctly. So the tank LB goes out to try to save the run. But we're unfortunately also lacking damage. Nidhogg's at 36%. Restfelger is very healthy at 14, and Restfelger has a massive defensive buff due to Enrage. We're not going to meet the check in this instance. And yeah, that's mostly tank recovery tech for Cauterize going into touchdown. It is a little stressful just because there's a lot of movement and planning that you have to do. But with repetition on the tank side of things, you'll be okay. And Wyrmsbreath II looks scary for the non-tanks, but it really is just understanding where you need to go depending on what you telegraph at the start of the raid during P2. As long as you do that, you'll be successful. So what we're gonna do is we're just gonna look at the wide shot going into Wyrmsbreath after Hollowed Wing 2. So I'm just gonna skip ahead on this wide shot of the POV. This is Aquafall 1. This is Hollowed Wing 1. And then we're going into Raw Flames. Skipping through Raw Flame. Come on, YouTube. Okay, cool. And then I'm just showing different advantages of Raw Flames for the movement and whatnot. Hot Wing 2. And then as you can see, oh, I'm sorry, this is still Raw Flames. Hollowed Wing 2 is coming up after Aquapod 2. Okay, here we go. We're moving into position for Hollowed Wing 2. The tanks are far, party close, party at the wall. Cool. And now we're preparing for Wyrmsbreath II. Static Wyrmsbreath II. So looking at the wide shot POV, let's see what's going on with the dragons. Auto, Wyrmsbreath II. We're going into our 2-minute, another auto. Tank 1 is going to take a buster. So tank 1 being the gunbreaker is moving into their little pocket, as well as everyone else moving into position. And then, you know, as I stressed earlier, so tank 1 is here. Tank 2 is over here. I'm on north side for this POV. So I'm north side facing south. And then tank 1's going to take the buster right now. Boom, buster on tank 1. And then we prepare for Cauterize. So as healer, I'm just getting heals out. I usually flip my camera to true north just to get my bearings. I have Pyretic. I have fire debuff, so I have to make sure I end up on Hresvoger's side. The tanks are doing tank things. And then we take our Cauterize. We're on the rails, so we're gonna be okay. We're on our respective side. We move to north side for touchdown. Keep the tanks healthy. So note for the healers, do throw a regen and just keep the tanks healthy so they don't die to their dot. It is very easy to forget to heal them and then they drop dead and we have problems with Hresvoger enraging on the enrage cast. And then from here on we just burn both dragons and then we move on to P7. So that's it for this video. The next video will cover P7 in its entirety. It's not a complex phase, but there is just, once again, you need to study mitigations and you need to understand the movement. And that's basically all of DSR. Yeah, that's effectively it. For the next video, I'll do the real-time callouts for P6 as well, just to have it all in one shot. And yeah, I hope you have a good day.